What's going on, guys? It's Danny from Fantasy Stock Exchange here, and today I'll be going through my top wide receiver start sits where I basically break down every single wide receiver matchup, who your guys are going to start, who you guys are going to sit, and who is a viable flex option. And for the parameters of this video, as you guys have heard these last few weeks, a start would indicate a player I consider as a top 24 level play, aka a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. A flex would be a player that is in, that wide receiver 3, 4, top 40ish range at wide receiver. And a sit would be any receiver that is not currently ranked inside my top 40. In this video, we're also going to be breaking down relevant wide receiver cornerback matchups and potential game script in terms of their implied totals and over-under set in games, so you guys can be best informed for your wide receiver start sit decisions in week 5 of fantasy football. I'll try to get this video to over 400 likes. If you enjoy, please leave a like down below and help us on our road to 20,000 subscribers. Also, if you guys are watching, leave a comment down below on your top start sit questions that have you staying up at night thinking about it. I will help you guys out. Leave those in the comments below. I'll try to get to as many as possible once this video is live. But before we get into the video, as always, we got to hit the intro. All right, before I get into the game-by-game analysis, here is the matchup chart, a chart that is based solely on this year's data now. You guys would have heard the past few weeks where I was talking about between the composite between the start of this year and last year's data. Well, we have enough data now to basically have an idea of who the good defenses are, so you guys can use this chart accordingly if you're making those start-sit decisions. But as I go through each matchup on the screen, you'll see the expected wide receiver cornerback matchup, as well as the wide receiver utilization we should be looking towards going into week 5. But before we get into each matchup, we have to go through the projected shadows according to PFF's Ian Hartitz. He does expect that Michael Pittman Jr. will be shadowed on Thursday Night Football against Patrick Surtain Jr., Broncos wide receiver Courtland Sutton to be shadowed against Stephon Gilmore, Romeo Doubs against Adoree Jackson, Devontae Parker against Jeffrey Okudah, Josh Reynolds against Jonathan Jones, Amari Cooper against Asante Samuel Jr., Mike Evans against AJ Terrell, DK Metcalf against Marshawn Lattimore, Marquise Brown against Darius Slay, AJ Brown against Myron Murphy, and then finally, he does also expect on Sunday Night Football Rashad Bateman to be shadowed by Chidobe Awuzie in that Ravens versus Bengals matchup. But now we get on to Thursday Night Football, the first game of the slate. Colts at Broncos. Broncos are 3.5-point home favorites. The over-under set at 42. And the Sharps are on the under here at about an 83% rate. In terms of this matchup, let's focus on the Colts side. On the Colts side, you are starting Michael Pittman Jr. He's commanded 28 targets in the 3 games he's played this year and a 24.3% target rate when he's been on the field. Given his volume, he's an every week top 24 wide receiver option as long as he's healthy. And at this point of the season, I don't think that any other Colts are worth starting. The closest one would be Alec Pierce. He's still a guy I want to see produce a couple more times before I elevate him into that top 40 status, however. On the Broncos side, you can start Courtland Sutton and flex Jerry Jeudy as a high-end flex option. Sutton this season has commanded a 27% target share to Jeudy's 16.7%. And I do believe at this point he should be viewed as the wide receiver 1 in Denver. I still wouldn't be shocked if, down stretch of the year, Jerry Jeudy ends up becoming that guy. He has faced some injuries these past couple of weeks, so we'll see how that develops. But as of now, you have to treat Courtland Sutton as the wide receiver 1. So he's a top 24 option. Jerry Jeudy being in that wide receiver 25 to 30 range. So a little bit of a discrepancy, a little bit of a favor towards Sutton compared to Jeudy at this point, in my opinion. Next matchup, we have the 9:30 London game. We got the Giants playing the Packers over in England. Packers are 8-point favorites in this game, over under set at 41, and the Sharps are on the under at an 89% rate in this game. In terms of this matchup on the Giants side, none of these receiving options, in my opinion, are worth entering your lineup. We've really got no clarity as to this team's depth chart thus far. It seems as though the Giants basically rotate their wide receivers on a week-to-week basis, and I think until Kadarius Toney and Wan'Dale Robinson are fully healthy, fully get their roles in this offense, I really don't think any options even sniff your lineup anytime soon. On the Packers side, it seems as though these top 2 wide receivers are pretty much set at this point. Veteran Allen Lazard and rookie Romeo Doubs seem to be this clear-cut wide receiver 1 and 2 for the Packers, given their usage and given their target shares. Obviously, with Lazard, he's pacing this team in terms of air yard share, that usage down the field. And with Romeo Doubs taking the crown in terms of targets per route run and target share on this team, I prefer Doubs straight up to Allen Lazard, but I do think both are in that wide receiver 30-40 range and both have their own plausible cases for an upside week in this matchup against the Giants. Next matchup, we go to the 1 p.m. slate. We have the Texans traveling on the road road to play the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jaguars are 7-point home favorites, 43.5 set over under, and the Sharps are on the under at an 80% clip, according to PFF. In terms of this matchup on the Texans side, the only constant week to week, in my opinion, is that Brandon Cooks is in your lineup as a wide receiver 2-3 type of play. I'd have him as a high-end wide receiver 3 this week going up against the Jaguars. We do see that he is the clear-cut alpha in terms of target share, in terms of usage in this offense. I just don't necessarily know how exactly explosive we should expect this Texans offense to be. So tempering expectations, he could very well get into that wide receiver 2 range, but I would more so have him in that wide receiver 25 to 30 area in my rankings, making him a super high-end flex option. On the Jaguar side, Christian Kirk, in my opinion, is an every week top 24 wide receiver. He has a 27.9% target share on the season in arguably the NFL's most improved offense with Jacksonville this year. Jaguars implied total is about 25 in this one compared to the Texans implied total of around 18, making Kirk, in my opinion, when you're comparing him to Brandon Cooks, a much better projected play given this role, offensive strength, and of course that Vegas expected team total. So in terms of Christian Kirk, top 15 to 20 level expectation. And like I said, with Cooks, top 25 to 30 expectation. I don't think any other wide receivers in this matchup can touch your lineup, but I do think that Zay Jones could prove to be a low-end flex option by building off this game from 2 weeks ago. Again, he's not in my top 40 right now, but if he comes back healthy and he looks like that contributing receiver we saw from a couple weeks ago, I don't mind if you have him in that fringe top 40 area moving forward. Next matchup, we have the Titans traveling on the road to play the Washington Commanders. The Commanders are 2.5-point home underdogs. The 42.5 is the over-under in this game, and the Sharps are on the under at a 54% rate. In terms of this game, let's make it very simple. On the Titans side, with the recent injury to Treylon Burks, you are playing no Titans wide receivers. No wide receiver on this team has commanded over a 20% target share or 45 receiving yards per game. And to put it simply, the upside is really non-existent out of these Titans receivers. Heck, at this point, Derrick Henry looks to be as involved as the Titans wide receiver 1, if anybody can spot who that is at this point. On the Commanders side, I think you can flex both Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin as top 30 level wide receivers. And I've recently made the switch in my rankings to having Samuel as the highest rated wide receiver on Washington. He's dominated Terry in the target share and targets per route run categories, while Terry has operated as that team's main downfield wide receiver. I do think that both are valuable, but give me the volume of Samuel. You guys can see that graphic on the screen. But Terry McLaurin on the season, 14% targets per route run, 16% target share. Whereas we do see with Curtis Samuel usurping him in both with 21% targets per route run and a 22% target share. So really like that volume play. Curtis Samuel operating as a Jarvis Landry plus in this offense, giving them that juice out of that slot position. Next matchup, we have the Bears traveling on the road to play the Minnesota Vikings. Vikings are 7-point home favorites in this game, 44 set over under, and the Sharps are on the under at a 79% rate in this game. In terms of this matchup, let's make it brief on the Bears side. No wide receivers entering your lineup. The top option here would be Darnell Mooney, but the Bears offense, to put it simply, has not shown consistent enough passing volume for me to trust it. Combining a passing attack that has averaged less than 20 attempts per game with a low implied total of 18 points in this game, I really do think that any Bears wide receiver would be a huge risk to put in your lineup. So I do think Darnell Mooney's a talented player, but until we see that passing volume go up on a week-to-week basis, he cannot touch your lineup. On the Viking side, it's pretty clear. You're obviously starting Justin Jefferson as a top 5 level play this week. After a slow start to this year, I also think that Adam Thielen has picked himself back up into that top 35-ish wide receiver range. And I do think he is a must flex week in and week out while he's performing. He looks like he's back to being that valuable wide receiver 3-4 for the rest of the season. And you guys will see the usage and the volume that he's seen has taken a tremendous uptick on a week-to-week basis. 12% target share in week 1, jumped to 15% in week 2. But we also see in the past 2 weeks that the target share went from 12 to 15 to 23 to 26. If he can keep residing in that low 20+% target share area, he can be an extremely valuable wide receiver 3 type for the rest of the season. So if you didn't buy low on Adam Thielen after that first game, which I don't blame you for, it's risky buying in on a 32-year-old wide receiver after a bad showing in week 1, but he's really taken this step up, and he can be trusted as a top 35 wide receiver, in my opinion, for the rest of the season. Next matchup, we do have the Dolphins traveling on the road to play the New York Jets. Jets are 3-point home underdogs in this game, 46 set over under, and the Sharps are on the over at a 77% clip. they're really expecting this to be a high scoring affair amongst interdivisional rivals. In terms of this game, let's go simple on the Dolphins side. You are clearly starting both of these superstar caliber wide receivers. These are two of the top 6 current leaders in receiving yards in the NFL. And as we know, with both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, both are huge plays waiting to happen. You're starting them every single week as top 10 level options, especially against a porous Jets defense that ranks 29th in EPA against the pass this year. On the Jets side, you can flex both of these young studs with Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore. Obviously, we've seen to start this season that Garrett Wilson has really usurped Elijah Moore in terms of the week-to-week rankings because of that usage being much more consistent on a week-to-week basis than what Moore's has been. The case for Moore, I'm willing to bet on a player, a young stud receiver that has been in on 90+% of the routes for the Jets this season. And it really just has to come down to him getting the targets. The target share has not been there comparatively to what we saw from last year, but as soon as he starts getting the targets, and as soon as he starts earning those targets, I do think he can get back into that wide receiver 2-3 type of discussion. But for the time being, Wilson has to be ranked higher than Elijah Moore. For Wilson, he's extremely close to that wide receiver top 24 type of range on a week-to-week basis. But until we see that target share more so reside in that 25% area, he's more so going to be a high-end wide receiver 3 rather than a low-end wide receiver 2 in my ranking. So with Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson, I think they're both, high-end to mid-end wide receiver 3s for the time being, with both having the potential to vault up in my weekly rankings. Next matchup, we do have the Falcons traveling on the road to play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Buccaneers are 9-point home favorites in this game, 48 set over under, and the Sharps are on the under at an 80% clip. From this matchup, again, another matchup we can keep it relatively brief with. On the Falcons side, you are clearly starting Drake London. Top 24 level expectation. I know he may have disappointed last week from a pure point production standpoint, but he still earned 7 targets on the team's 19 passing attempts and is the clear main weapon for the Falcons given current usage. I think you just got to plug him in, start him as, a low-end wide receiver 2, especially given the tough matchup against the Buccaneers, but the volume is too tough to ignore when it comes to Drake London. On the Bucs side, I think you can start both of their top 2 wide receivers. Godwin this past week returned to action, and he looked like that healthy, normal Chris Godwin that we've seen operating that volume dominant big slot role for this Tampa Bay offense. If he can get back on track, if he can keep up that Chris Godwin level play that we saw this past week, this Bucs offense is going to be very hard to stop, and Chris Godwin will be an every week top 24 wide receiver. In terms of Mike Evans, as long as he's suited up in the NFL and as long as he is healthy, he's been a clear-cut starting caliber wide receiver for fantasy. Team's clear boundary threat here coming off a huge game against the Chiefs. I do think that he's looking to build off that game. No other wide receivers in this match. None of those players reach that top 40 status, so I wouldn't play any single other wide receiver apart from the top 3 in this matchup between the Falcons and the Buccaneers. Next matchup, we do have the Lions traveling on the road to play the New England Patriots. Patriots are 3-point home favorites, 45.5 set over under in this game, with the Sharps being on the over at an 85% clip. In terms of this game, it's pretty simple to me on the Lions side. The main question here is the health status of Amon-Ra St. Brown coming into this game. But if he is healthy, I do view him as a top 15 level wide receiver this week. But if he is not healthy, I do think that Josh Reynolds has seen a sizable role increase without him on the field. Back-to-back weeks of 8+ targets and double-digit fantasy points. I do think that if Amon-Ra misses this game as well, that Josh Reynolds can be a very solid, mid-tier wide receiver 3, high-end flex play for you. Again, if Amon-Ra St. Brown misses this matchup. On the Patriots side, as long as Jacoby Myers is healthy, you can flex him. This is the team's clear-cut alpha wide receiver 1 when he's healthy. And the health status is really the only question mark here. I do think, though, if Jacoby Myers doesn't go in this game, I believe all of those Pats' other wide receivers are way too volatile to put into my lineup. So they're more so in that wide receiver 45, 50, 55 range, not making that top 40. So Jacoby Myers, if he makes it, it's going to be a top 35 to 40 wide receiver. But if he does not play in this game, I wouldn't play any other Patriots wide receivers. But on to the next matchup, we do have the Seahawks traveling on the road to play the New Orleans Saints. Saints are 5.5-point home favorites in this one, 46 set over under, with the Sharps absolutely hammering the over. 98% of the Sharps are on the over in this game. On the Seahawks side, you are starting DK Metcalf and flexing Tyler Lockett. Their play has been inconsistent at points this year, but both are still holding over a 25% target share this year and occupy one of the most target-concentrated offenses in the entire NFL. If the Seahawks want to move the ball, especially through the air, it's going to come on the back of Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf. Seahawks run through, like I said, these top 2 elite wide receivers, and Geno Smith has been playing very well, but does depend on both of them playing their game. I do think that DK is a low-end wide receiver to start against the Saints. And Tyler Lockett is a high-end wide receiver 3 flex play. So while I think DK Metcalf is in that wide receiver 20 to 24 range, Tyler Lockett's not too far behind in that wide receiver 25 to 30 range. I do prefer DK's talent and end zone target share, but again, I do think both are great plays given their levels of involvement. On the Saints side, it's pretty clear. Chris Olave has earned must-start status. I do think he's a top 20 wide receiver given the volume that he has seen until proven otherwise. And I do think if Michael Thomas is ready to go in this game, if Michael Thomas is healthy enough to play in this game, he is a clear start at wide receiver, a top 20 level option. Before he got hurt, he was clearly involved in this offense. 8 targets, 9 targets, and got 6 targets prior to his injury. So I do think if Michael Thomas does suit up, we should be seeing that prime Michael Thomas come out despite battling that toe injury. In terms of other Saints receivers, I think that Jarvis Landry, especially if Michael Thomas is back, is too volatile to put into my lineup as a top 40 level play. But again, he's one of those players that is probably in that wide receiver 45 to 50 range. Next matchup, we do have the Steelers traveling on the road to play the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo is a 14-point home favorite in this game, 46.5 set over under, with the Sharps hammering the under at an 81% clip. On the Bills side, Stephon Diggs is an every week top 5 level wide receiver. You're starting him, you're making yourself a coffee, and you're enjoying watching him on Sundays for every week that he's healthy. I'd also feel comfortable flexing Gabe Davis, but I am starting to worry about the strength of his ankle following recent performances. It does seem to me, in my opinion, that the ankle is getting in the way of his route running, quick breaks, lateral movement ability, and it is something to monitor as we gear towards the next couple of weeks. If it continues to inhibit his play once again in this game, I will tread more cautiously moving forward. On the Steelers side, I think Deontay Johnson is currently ranked as my number 24 out of 24 starting caliber wide receivers. We do know the case for Deontay Johnson at this point, a 31% target share on the season. And while the points haven't exactly flown through the door just yet, we trust the usage and we trust the potential uptick in potential with Kenny Pickett coming to the helm at the quarterback position. I will say, though, give it a couple more weeks of George Pickens balling out, and he'll be an every week top 40 wide receiver with the gap closing between him and Johnson. So if George Pickens keeps playing the way he has, you guys will see the usage uptick, but went from a 9% target share player in his first 2 games to a 21% target share and a 31% target share in the past 2 weeks. So if George Pickens keeps continuing this level of play and Deontay Johnson keeps losing targets to George Pickens, they're both going to be in that wide receiver 25 to 40 range on a week-to-week basis. Next matchup, we have the Chargers traveling on the road to play the Cleveland Browns. Browns are 3-point home favorites in this game. 47.5 set over under with the Sharps on the over at a 70% clip this week. Let's go to the Chargers side. You can start Mike Williams as the team's clear-cut wide receiver 1. He's volatile, as we know, on a week-to-week basis. He'll either have, 1 catch for 15 yards, or he'll go out there and put up 8 for 113 and a touchdown. You really don't know what you're getting from Mike Williams on a week-to-week basis, but he has a top 10 level ceiling in any given game, based on the strength of his offense, based on his ability to win downfield, and based on the potential high-scoring nature against the Browns. I think he's a clear-cut top 15 level wide receiver play, especially with the assumption that Keenan Allen is out again. If Keenan Allen does play, I also consider him to be a flexible option coming off that hamstring injury. But with all expectation right now being on him being out, I'm not trusting any other Chargers wide receiver to put into my lineup aside from Mike Williams. On the Brown side, Amari Cooper has shown he is the team's main alpha wide receiver, but his toxic trait of, disappearing in some games seems to be carrying over from his time in Dallas. I do think that the law of averages says he's a top 30 caliber wide receiver, and his target share on the season agrees. And I do think in a potential shootout, like I said, against the Chargers, it would be foolish not to try to ride the high wave this week for Amari Cooper. This just seems like the type of game that he would go out and he would go absolutely ballistic in, but he is still a very risky option given his level of involvement on a week-to-week basis. So it is something to monitor. High-end wide receiver 3 expectations, but he could either be the wide receiver 1 overall in the week, or he could be a wide receiver 6 this week. There's really no talking when it comes to Amari Cooper. On to the 4 p.m. slate, we have the 49ers traveling on the road to play the Carolina Panthers. Carolina being 6.5-point home underdogs in this game. Over-under set at 39, and the Sharps are on the under 65%. So we're expecting this to be a low-scoring, low-paced type of game. But we'll go to the 49ers side. Deebo Samuel is a must-start every single week. Focal point of the 49ers offense this year, Deebo has 47 opportunities, including 19 carries in his 4 games that he's played this year. You are clearly starting Deebo Samuel, but at the time being, I really wouldn't feel comfortable putting Brandon Ayuk in my lineup. The 49ers game plan recently, for the most part, has been a steady dose of Deebo Samuel and elite defense, all the while slowing the pace down and try to win these low-scoring, muddy type of games like we saw this past week on Monday Night Football against the Rams. 49ers have not thrown the ball over 30 times in any of the games Jimmy G has played this year. My concern for Ayuk is that a 21% target share on a 25 pass attempt offense this week is very volatile, again, on a week-to-week basis. So Brandon Ayuk, I love the player. I love the talent. Still earning targets at a decent rate, but if this passing volume is not going to go up, there's a ton of elite playmaking talent on this team, and if they're only throwing the ball 25 times, there's not a lot to go around. On the Panthers side, I do think that you can flex DJ Moore. He's seen his target share jump back up in these past few weeks, and while the matchup is tough going up against maybe the best defense in the entire NFL, they do give up some leeway in terms of top receiving options. So I don't feel good about it, but I will trust the underlying metrics when it comes to DJ Moore. But I'm adjusting my expectations to more so a mid to low end wide receiver 3 and at risk of falling outside the top 40 if he continues to disappoint from a fantasy perspective. Next matchup, we have the Eagles traveling on the road to play the Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals are 5.5-point home underdogs. 49 set over under in this game. Sharps are expecting a high scoring affair with the road team favored by nearly a touchdown. So we will see how that ends up materializing. But on the Eagles side, you are starting A.J. Brown and flexing Devontae Smith. Brown has commanded nearly 10 targets per game thus far in his first 4 games as a Philadelphia Eagle, 38 targets in those 4 games, and is currently a top 10 wide receiver in points per game. As we know, going up against a Cardinals snowflake secondary, we could be in store for a weak winning level performance when it comes to A.J. Brown. Devontae Smith, I also do think is worth a flex start. We've seen a huge bump in terms of his weekly target share from week 1's goose egg of a stat line. He's been excellent. He's been playing well, and he's been commanding targets. So he's worth a top 30 to 35-ish level play from a fantasy perspective this week in this high-scoring tilt against the Arizona Cardinals. On the Cardinals side, you can start Hollywood Brown. We've seen an elite target share for him thus far. I trust the volume and potential game script working in the favor of Marquise Brown. I have a top 20 level expectation for Hollywood, and as long as he maintains this 25+% target share, he's going to be a constant in that top 20 of my wide receiver rankings. Next matchup, we do have my beloved Dallas Cowboys traveling on the road to play the Los Angeles Rams. Cowboys are 5.5-point road underdogs in this game. Over under set at 43 with the Sharps on the over at a 66% clip. So potentially a sneaky high scoring affair between the Cowboys and the Rams, according to how the Sharps are betting it. In terms of this game, on the Rams side, you are starting the best player in fantasy football. Cooper Kupp is matchup proof, even in games where the Rams offense doesn't look good. Cooper Kupp is just the constant. He's basically locked in any single week for 7+ receptions, 80+ receiving yards. He is a dynamite fantasy football asset, even having a better year thus far than he did this past year in terms of his record-breaking 2021 campaign. No other Rams wide receivers are worth a start in this game. Allen Robinson is the 97th ranked wide receiver according to PFF, and the Rams' second most valuable weapon in terms of their pass game right now is currently Tyler Higbee. So you're starting Cooper Kupp out of this receiving core. No other Rams receiver is touching your lineup. On the Cowboys side, CeeDee Lamb is a must-start wide receiver every week with a top 15 level expectation and has seen top 5 wide receiver usage on the year. Expected matchup against Jalen Ramsey is tough, but I do think that Lamb is a good enough player to be able to separate, and the Cowboys have done a good job scheming his opportunities open in the past couple weeks. Michael Gallup remains an unknown, seeing that low target share he saw last week, but I am putting him in as a low-end flex option with elite upside in this game. Again, we expect this game to be high scoring. Cowboys finally have a vertical passing offense, vertical element to their passing offense with Michael Gallup coming to town. And if he can open up this offense, if he can win maybe a couple deep bombs, 25, 30+ yard plays, which he's been known for in the past, I do think that this Cowboys offense is going to be able to get on a roll against a Rams defense that has relatively been disappointing to start the season. Noah Brown is outside of my top 40, but he could re-enter that range if he keeps up the seasonal target share he's been able to command. Has looked like a fantastic tertiary wide receiver for this Cowboys offense, but I am worried about with the presence of Michael Gallup. We do see that target share for Noah Brown start to dilute quite a bit. Next matchup, we do have the Sunday night football game. The Bengals travel on the road to play the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens are 3-point home favorites in this game. Over under set at 48.5, and the Sharps are on the under at a 59% rate in this game. Bengals side, you're starting both Bengals wide receivers. Both have commanded elite volume and are threats to take over the game at any single point. For Jamar Chase, I do have a top 5 to 10 level expectation. For T. Higgins, more so in that high-end wide receiver 2, top 10 to 15 level range. You're setting them in your lineup for Sunday Night Football against a poor Ravens D and heating the popcorn. These two wide receivers should be able to dominate against a Ravens secondary that hasn't been able to stop a nosebleed thus far. On the Ravens side, Bateman I do think is worth a flex, but I am worried about the volume and low route participation we have seen from Bateman in the past couple of weeks. You guys will see the screenshot on the screen. But basically, when it comes to Rashad Bateman, hasn't had a single game this year above 79% of the routes for the Ravens. And we did see this past week a 53% route participation for Bateman. He must be injured. There must be something up there, but starting a wide receiver with a 53% route participation last week is very risky. Consider him a low-end flex option, but I do think once he gets that route participation back up to acceptable numbers, he could be in that low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 range. I still think, again, he's worth that flex option given the fact that he is easily the most talented wide receiver on this Baltimore Ravens, but I really want to monitor the situation. I really want to see how his route participation does increase moving forward. And finally, the last matchup of the slate, we do have the Las Vegas Raiders traveling on the road to play the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday Night Football. Raiders are 7-point road underdogs in this game, 51 set over under. The Sharps are expecting an absolute barn burner of a game. They expect both of the teams to be able to score and be able to score often. So keep that in mind when you're making your decision. On the Raiders side, with Hunter Renfrow being banged up, I still think that Devontae Adams is the only wide receiver in your lineup in this game. Over a 30% target share this year from one of the best talents in the NFL. He is, of course, a top 5 to 7 wide receiver, set and forget it wide receiver in your lineup on a week-to-week basis. Start him again, top 5 to 10 level confidence. On the Chiefs side, Juju's worth a flex shout in your lineup. He leads the Chiefs in terms of target share in an expected high-scoring game. I'm chasing the potential volume with Juju. I do think that one to monitor in this game in terms of his route participation, in terms of his snaps, will be Sky Moore. We did see this past week that his snap share actually jumped from 9 to 25% and has seen a 23% targets per route run rate this year. As the snaps keep increasing, I do expect him to develop into an every week flex soon, but he's not quite there yet. If he has a game this week against the Raiders where he goes out there and he plays in like 50+% of the routes, he's definitely going to be one of the top waiver options going into week 6 of the waiver wire. But either way, if you guys have stuck around to the end of the video and you guys enjoyed, make sure you leave a like down below. Again, I mentioned in the prelude, 400 likes is the goal on this video. And as always, if you watch all this video and you're still stuck on your start-sit decisions, drop your top start-sit decision, and I'll try to get to as many as possible in the comment section prior to Thursday Night Football kickoff, prior to Sunday night, whatever the case may be when you need that decision by. I'll try to get to every single comment. But appreciate you guys for sticking around. Peace out. Good luck in your matchups.
Why you need the money?